Right. So I think the way we kind of entered into today's set of topics was this idea of uh, quality, completed series, maybe some shorter, maybe some longer, but ones that you can sort of pick up now and know that there's not going to be any continuation and just be comfortable, pounding through in one sitting and moving on to something else. And we originally got this kicked off talking about our mutual love for Roka no Yusha, or
Yes.
Brave of the Six Flowers, and then it sort of spiraled out of that into other similar shows. So I think we talk about Roka, but then we each have sort of assembled a list of one and done type anime. Some of them might be OVA or have follow up OVAs, but the idea here are shows that you can just grab now and chunk through the whole thing at your leisure. But
And have a sense
we'll
of
start out, I guess,
completion.
with Roka no Yusha, and I won't step on Jay's love of this series, but I have very, very strong positive thoughts about it. So I'll let you lead this one off.
Who me? Oh God. How do I put it? Like, this was a sleeper hit for me. I did not think I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. I just was watching it because the opening was really, really nice. And I was like, this is cute. The first episode was kind of cool. Let's keep it going. As it kept going, I was obsessed. I was obsessed. It was to the point where it was like the week wait was going to be, it was like hell because they almost always ended the episodes on cliffhangers. And the characterization of everyone, the world building, the backstory that they gave us, like they gave us all of this information, and then they also gave us like different points of views from different people, and they hid certain things in a certain way that made the audience think. So I'm trying to say it so that I don't ruin it for you guys because I want you to watch this.
It's
I don't
tough.
want
It's
you to
really
be spoiled.
tough.
Yeah, I don't want you to be spoiled by us because this is something that you need to watch completely blind going in because you will enjoy the shit out of it. It is so good. And it's honestly really sad that we have to include this as part of this segment because this deserved more seasons.
Yeah, I'm
It
gonna
deserved.
I'm gonna put Roka no Yusha on the weird pedestal of an older series. It's been out for quite a long time now. That I don't want to spoil for people. Typically, and as I sort of walk through the list of stuff that I've got, I'm happy to sort of dive into story or narrative details, mostly as a uh, breadcrumb for folks to go pick it up to let them know how good it is. But because the plot of Roka relies on a very basic but very intriguing mystery, it's very difficult to talk about all the ways in which the show and the characters grow on you very, very, almost immediately because you wind up giving
Yes.
away some of the details that might let you figure out what's really going on. What I will say is that the main character, Adlet, is one of my favorite archetypes, which is, the sort of wild but wily main character who wins mostly with his brain and not necessarily with special magical
Power.
powers or even doing stuff that's remotely cool. Even though I will say that the show is beautiful, and so all the characters look amazing, and there's great animation and some very tense and well put together action scenes. But again, the show mostly relies on tension and drama rather than sort of out and out frenzied violence, which is
Yes.
which will be a part of some of the other recommendations that I have. But I was hooked from the very first episode. Because not only did it look great and the music is
You knew
great,
what was up.
yeah, but also that the main character was someone who didn't start out as one possessing an obvious advantage, and so it became interesting whenever he would get thrown into new, even more difficult or life-threatening circumstances. You couldn't necessarily telegraph how he or the other characters would get out of it, or if they would get out of it, because they established very early on that there are real serious consequences for stuff that goes down. Also, how people missed out on Fremi that season as like waifu material is crazy to me.
It was because of our arms.
Yeah, probably. The reveal for some of the true powers of the characters in the series are both like ridiculous and also horrifying in a couple of cases. Like if you have like a problem with Vor, don't look too deeply into Chamo because it'll mess with you.
Yeah.
But it's a really cool series and one that I recommend people go back to. The light novels continue on well past what was adapted for an anime. I don't think it's coming back. Just popularity was not there for it the season it
wasn't.
It aired.
It deserved it.
Really
though.
Good.
It deserved it. Yeah, I would say definitely going back off of what you just said. There were several moments of me having a sense of hopelessness for the characters, where I kind of was just like, I don't know how they're gonna get out of this, or you're gonna die, like they're gonna kill your ass. There were so many points in time when I was watching the anime where I was just like, I just feel it almost gave me like, was Akame ga Kill out then? I don't think, or maybe they were airing at the same time. It definitely gave me similar vibes to Akame ga Kill, where I was like, someone's gonna die at any moment. Someone's gonna die, but well, no, okay. Let me end it there because I'm definitely about to spoil.
Yeah, exactly. All I'll say is that it took maybe 5 years after this show aired for me to feel the level of hatred and antipathy for an anime character as I did after the end of this series. It took a long time, and prior to that, I don't think I'd ever felt that kind of just brain-numbing anger at someone.
Y'all. When you watch this, you need to watch this show. When you get to the end, please hit us up on social media.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I want to know what other people went through, because I definitely went through it.
Give us your thoughts on what happens at the end, because let me. I'm moving on because I'm about to start spoiling.
Good idea.
So another one for me that was a really good one and done was Erased, or Boku Dake ga Inai Machi, which basically, I'm pretty sure if you watch anime or frequent weeb communities, you've probably heard of this. But this one basically deals with it's like a sci-fi mystery with like a very slight kind of sci-fi. Like sci-fi barely has anything to do with it. But it's basically a guy. He went through his life, lived his life. There was a string of murders in his hometown of little girls, and no one solved it. No one knew what happened. And there was one girl where he saw her literally right before she was murdered the next day, and it always stuck on his mind. And he also ended up being like one of the witnesses. And he basically develops a little bit of trauma, and it throws his life off balance. And he basically is just like a pizza delivery man at 29 years old. Not to say that that's bad. If you're making your money, make your fucking money. But anyways, what happens is he ends up he has this like power where he can see into the future like a few seconds, or it depends. Like the power, it depends on like the strength, depending on the situation, etc., etc. But he can see things, and he's spoken to like one of his coworkers before about it. And what ends up happening is, he ends up using the power to jump back in time to the point where he was in elementary school. And what he does is he tries to solve the murders, or not solve, but he tries to prevent the murders of the little girls in the town, and also find out who the person is. Because, I guess I can go ahead and tell you guys that part. What happens is the person who did the murders when he was younger came back into his life when he was older. And that person basically like murders his mom and tries to kill him. So he tries to frame him in the future by killing his mom and having the cops show up. So the only way that he can even fix his life is by jumping back in time and getting this murderer like arrested back when he was like a child, and he does retain everything that he, like all the memories, all of the emotional growth, all the kind of stuff, like everything that who he was as a person is 29 years old, he has when he goes back to when he's like, I think what, 7 or 9 or so. It's a really good show. It's a really good one and done. You get closure. You get a lot of closure. It gets solved. Just know that it does. They do solve it. And if you really, really like it, the manga actually has a different ending. So that's one of my recommendations.
And I can echo that recommendation. I picked it up, I think, as it aired, and definitely was not disappointed. There's a lot of subject matter that is covered. That's hard, I think, because it mostly involves young people, and
yes.
They do a pretty good job. You know, it is effectively a science fiction story, but you spend so long with the characters sort of in fairly normal circumstances that I just think it's treated with a level of respect that it shouldn't bother anyone, you know, when they get to the tougher stuff, because I feel the show and the producers did a really good job of like being sensitive to how serious some of the events that are depicted really are. So for my next recommendation, going back to the past, a series that aired back in 2002 called Magical Shopping Arcade Abenobashi, or Abenobashi Maho Shotengai. It's actually a series that was produced by Gainax.
Ooh.
And it's one that's forgotten and usually not talked about because it's, again, one of their earlier and weirder sorts of stories. The overall plot revolves around 2 children, so we're following some kind of theme here. Childhood friends, Sashi and Arumi, and they both live in the titular Abenobashi, which is a commercial district that's set outside of Osaka. An accident occurs where Sashi's grandfather is injured trying to go after a cat, and he learns that both his best friend Arumi is going to be moving away soon, and then also the commercial district, or the shopping district, is going to be shut down. And it's set, obviously, you know, early 2000s, so this is during the beginnings of what was ultimately Japan's financial downturn. As a result of this, he and Arumi get pulled into a alternate dimension, which is essentially a Benobashi, but populated by analogs of Sashi's own otaku interests. And so there's all sorts of different worlds, nonsensical versions of the shopping district that they travel as they try to get back to their reality. So you have worlds that are based on, you know, war, science fiction, fantasy, dating sims, and even American movies. And they're all presented in a very surreal way where they meet different versions of family members and friends and other characters from the real world, but through this lens. And as you watch the series, what you realize is that while it's framed as a story about trying to get home, in fact, the reason why the pair keep finding themselves in new and weirder versions of the shopping district isn't because there's sort of a rabbit hole they got to follow. It's because Sashi doesn't want to go home. Because as sort of laid out in the beginning, everything is changing and there's a lot of trauma. And so the series is really about him growing up and coming to accept all of the many things that change as you transition from being a young person into more of the adult world, and also understanding that places and people will go away and it won't always be pleasant. And so I last watched this maybe 5 or 10, somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, because I caught it maybe a year after it originally aired. And I noted back then that like my feelings about the show and my memories started to melt together. Where I originally remember it being this sort of fun, wacky adventure that had a lot of experimental and interesting animation. And then when I watched it again when I was a little bit older, kind of just out of college, the nostalgia struck me heavy. And I don't mean the nostalgia for going back and watching something older. I mean that nostalgia is actually a big part of the story and the tropes that are played with in the series. And then having reviewed a little bit of it again to talk about today, I felt like that journey towards adulthood felt a lot more real to me as I became an adult. So it's something that has a lot of layers, and no matter where you're coming at this, it's just super interesting, and a snapshot also of Japanese culture from maybe 15 or 20 years ago. There was also a manga adaptation that came out, and it's a short series. It's only about 13 episodes, so you can get through it pretty quick.
Yeah, that's like one day. Oh, that actually sounds really interesting. Let me add that to my list. For me, my next one would be Toradora, which I'm pretty sure you have seen Toradora somewhere out in the wilderness, recommended by someone, and I just want to let you know that it is definitely a must watch. It is a shoujo, which, oh my god, is this the second? No, I just talk about shoujos a lot because I watch them. But there are good shoujos out there. They're not all just about like pink, pretty love, whatever. Anyway, Toradora, basically, it's comedy, I would say like rom-com, but you really can't define it as a rom-com because the second curve of the show is so fucking visceral and just relatable that the comedy kind of just like doesn't even fucking matter anymore because it's some real ass shit. So basically it is the situation of Ryuji and Taiga. Ryuji's a guy, Taiga's a girl, and Ryuji and Taiga both have best friends. Ryuji likes Taiga's best friend and Taiga likes Ryuji's best friend. So they basically get together and try to like come up with plans to hook the other one up with the other one's best friend. The main cast is made of 5 people, so Ryuji, Minori, and then Taiga and Yusaku. And then there's Amy. Amy is Yusaku's childhood friend who's also been a model her entire life. So basically what happens is throughout this entire show, we see these 5 characters grow basically, and it's set in high school. We see them grow into the people that they basically are going to be for the rest of their lives. One growth arc that I really, really love is Amy, who she's always been pretty. She's always gotten what she's wanted her entire life. And what happens is once she's brought into the group, Taiga throws her the fuck off, where she's basically like, this is the first person who's never bowed down to me because I'm so beautiful, and et cetera, et cetera. And in actuality, Amy's an asshole. And she's an asshole because she's always gotten her way. So when she doesn't get her way, she fucking throws a fit. And by the end of the series, we see Amy basically including that assholishness as part of her like regular personality, and people loving her for that because it's actually a part of who she fucking is. The rest of it, the relationships, I'm not gonna mention because that shit gets so good that you just need to watch it. But they also bring into the realm of, or they also go into the realm of like different familial situations, certain people having access to money but not having access to emotional reciprocation with their parents, basically being thrown aside. And then you have someone who doesn't have everything, but their parent is always there, but then that parent that is always there isn't quite the best parent that you would like to be around a developing teenager. So there's something for everyone, to be honest. And by the end of the series, you literally are just like, where's season 2? And it came out in 2008. We have not gotten to season 2, and we deserve it. It's a light novel. There's more. We deserve it. We're gonna get it. We better get it. If Log Horizon can get season 3, then I can get Toradora season 2.
It can happen.
It better happen. God damn it. Okay. That's it.
So my next recommendation is kind of a sneaky one, because we were looking at series that you could finish very quickly. But if you like this one, you'll wind up finding a lot more similar in genre, at least. It's 8th Mobile Suit Team from the Gundam franchise. So
Mm-hmm.
the interesting thing, and I love Gundam, but one of the things about that I would say is a big problem is that if you start from the original series in 1979, it's a very imposing uh, universe to get involved in, because first of all you have what are
Yes.
called the original or universal century stories, which all take off from the that first original Gundam, and then there are all these spin-offs or after century or alternative timelines that generally feature giant robots but don't share any of the history. An example would be from a couple of years ago, Iron Blooded Orphans, which I thought was fantastic, but I think is a little bit too long for this list. Eighth Mobile Suit Team is a 12 episode OVA series that to me is both an incredible standalone if you've never watched or have very little interest in the overall Gundam series, because it tells its own story. It's self-contained, and it ends. It has a finite ending. But also, if you've ever wondered if you might be interested in going and checking out some of the older material, especially the Universal Century stuff, this is where I would point people, because it's just modern enough that you get some gorgeous hand-drawn animation, and with plenty of different robot suit designs, and just a little sprinkling of the overall Gundam story, but it's also incredibly
Yeah.
personal. And to me, I think the last couple years we've seen Gundam Unicorn and other Universal Century series start to come back in vogue. I mean, Gundam Unicorn had a movie that ran last year, and those are sort of billed as a new starting point for people. But to me, the series is so wrapped up in its own jargon and history that even those are really they're more like fan service for robot heads than they are an entry point.
Yeah.
And I would say Eighth Mobile Suit Team is a perfectly fine series to just pick up and go.
Standalone.
So to give the short overview, it's effectively a star-crossed lovers type tale of a pilots on both sides of the war. The interesting thing that I like about it is that they whereas the original Gundam series is more like a takeoff on World War II, Eighth Mobile Suit Team is really more like the Vietnam War. Number one, it takes place in Southern Asia. Two, it focuses on a small squad, mostly fighting, close quarters, ugly jungle warfare. There's a lot of inter squad dynamic that really they spend a lot of time on, and less time so much on sort of jargony, I would say borderline boring, big picture, war fighting. And then the suit design is very practical. There's a lot of adaptation for working in swampy jungle, just claustrophobic environments. And I think the characterization, because it's a 12 episode OVA, there's a lot of time spent building up characters, which is something that if you don't care about giant robots, the characters themselves are also very interesting. So while it's old enough that I could probably spoil it and nobody would care, it has. I'm going to avoid doing that. Also, whether you watch it subtitled or dubbed, both voice productions were really, really, really good. In fact, I might even say that in some ways the dub is superior to the English dub is superior to the original Japanese in a couple of respects. But however you choose to
Okay.
consume it, it's really, really good. So that's my plug. And then if you really get into Gundam, there's other stuff, but this kind of sits on its own, doesn't involve any of the characters or feats or exploits from the rest of the series. And it's if you find yourself enjoying it, but you don't really have time to watch 500 episodes of everything else, it's perfectly fine.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So is Gundam Unicorn related to the original Gundam?
Indeed,
With,
it is. So
the black box are like Char Aznable and
yeah,
stuff
all
like
that stuff. Well, the characters, like Char is a central character from the original Gundam series, and he's popped up in the sequels that were written after the fact. So the original Gundam came out in 1979, and it details about 1 year's worth of conflict because it's this
Yes.
titular 1-year war. And so in that, Char is an antagonist, and then the hero for that one is Amuro Ray. And then in subsequent sequels, which is Zeta Gundam, these are, when I'm saying sequels, I mean TV shows that aired on TV. There were plenty of interstitial OVAs and other things, but it's Zeta Gundam follows that, and Char is a character in that as well. Only this time he sort of switched sides, and it's a new protagonist. And then there's Double Zeta and Unicorn, and those are the TV series that have been produced based on the original timeline. But of course, there have been an innumerable number of OVAs, many of which are fantastic, movies and other things that fill in the gaps. But just as far as time goes, you see Unicorn takes place in about, is it 30 years after, or 25 years after the original? Something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the only reason why I asked that is because the Super Robot Taisen games, they have a lot of the Gundam series in there, and they have Zeta Gundam and Unicorn in one of the most recent ones. And Char actually shows up. Well, no, it's not Char. It's like a blonde guy with a mask, and they like determine that it's not Char, but it's like the successor or some shit like that.
Yeah, there's a running meme in UC Gundam series about like Char or Char clones or like other things. I mean, we could have a whole like conversation about
we can
UC Gundam,
write that down.
but to keep things relatively short, in Unicorn, the character you see with the mask is purported to be a clone of Char, who dies in a movie called Char's Counterattack, which is excellent. It's really, 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 really good. And so that's why you probably had those little references and hints dropped, because throughout a Unicorn, there's always this question: is like, is this person Char, the ghost of Char? Blah blah blah. I mean, Gundam has all this like psychic, sci-fi stuff that's sort of in the background most of the time. So these ideas are kind of possible. That's the other great thing about 8th Mobile Suit Team. It doesn't have any of that like weird bullshit, like new type stuff. It's very little of that, and a lot of just regular people piloting big suits trying to kill each other.
Yeah, I've had a small exposure to 8th Mobile Suit simply because, of course, I'm playing video games again. There's an SD Gundam series called SD Gundam Generation. And so there's like Genesis and Cross Rays and stuff like that. And basically that whole series is you only fight with Gundams from different Gundam series. So I knew it was an anime, but like you said, it's Gundam. I had no intention of going back.
It's a lot. It's a lot of content. So 8th Mobile Suit Team is my short run choice. My favorite Gundam series of all time is Zeta Gundam. And if you are a new person to that series, they did what they call the new translation, which is basically a series of movies where they adapted the 2 seasons of Zeta into 4 movies. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. It could be 3. And they added new animation. Now it's a little jarring because like you'll be watching it and you'll see like all the old stuff from the 80s, and then it'll just be like 2 minutes of like brand new animation for a scene, and then it'll like switch right back. And I think they kept all the audio, the original VA work, but I think that it's just a lot shorter to consume. So if you just wanted to like catch up on what the hell is going on, you could watch those movies and get pretty far. I felt like it was a little bit of a bait and switch when they were released, because everyone thought we were gonna just get reanimated Zeta Gundam, and instead it was like 80 to 90% old stuff and then some new stuff thrown in. But it's still fine. Gundam is Gundam. They sell model kits. I have a whole box of like Gundam model kits I haven't put together yet. So.
Oh my god, I do too at my fucking house in Texas. Okay. We can do a Gundam episode because there's so much more there clearly. Yep. So my next one, I guess I've been talking about like depressing shit so much. So I'm gonna save the next one for my next turnaround. I guess I'll go to Kill la Kill. This was a one and done, and this was a really good one and done, and it gave me everything that I wanted and more. If you do not know what Kill la Kill is, it's the one where the girls are fighting in lingerie, basically, with swords, and there's blood everywhere. It's good. It's really good. If you are familiar with Gurren Lagann, these are like some of the same people who worked on Gurren Lagann with Gainax. It's Studio Trigger now, though. And you know, everyone knows who Studio Trigger is because not everyone. I mean, but they're literally up and coming so fast that it's kind of ridiculous. But everything that they touch is really fucking good. Like even Little Witch Academia, I was like, you know what? I don't mind this. This isn't that bad. Kitsunaiver, though, they can keep that. I'm not watching that. Kill la Kill was my favorite anime for several fucking years. Like, several years. The comedy, the animation, the music, the storyline, the over-the-top, just balls to the walls, expression. It was just literally, it was so entertaining every single episode. Even the filler episodes were so good. And I definitely would say, like, it definitely gave me kind of like a gritty sense of feel, especially with the animation style when it was airing. And that's like a stylistic choice. But overall, I just really can't remember in like recent times an anime that I literally enjoyed so much week to fucking week. I'm trying to decide if I want to spoil it or not. No, I won't spoil it. But Gurren Lagann, definitely in the same vein, not the same kind of like ecchi fan services, which, speaking of ecchi and fan services, Kill la Kill, I know that when you first watch it, you're going to be like, this is excessive. Why are they showing this? Oh my God. I definitely was kind of the same way. After you get to the fight in episode 3, you don't give a fuck about that shit no more. It doesn't matter anymore. They keep it moving, and the plot really takes like a really hard, not a hard turn, but just like the show kind of like redefines itself between like episode 13 and 15. And then from 15 on, it's just like amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm just going to keep saying that.
It's epic. Kill la Kill is epic.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to spoil it exactly. Like, I didn't give a really fuck. I didn't say that. I did not give as many things about like Toradora, or I did say that much stuff about Toradora because it's shoujo and you guys probably aren't going to watch it. But Kill la Kill, no, this is something that you're going to watch and you're going to be like, oh, I'm not doing anything the rest of the day. I'm going to watch this. The reveals are cool. Some stuff I didn't see coming. Some things I did see coming, and I didn't give a fuck because the journey to the end was so much fun. It was fun. That's it. That show was fun. It was so fucking fun.
Yeah, and I think like some people may have stayed away from it because it was so hyped when it came out. I personally don't understand that mentality, but hey, sometimes it runs people off. Go back and watch it. Animation is awesome. The message, especially behind the story, is one that is still, I think, relevant and timely. You'd be, I was not surprised that it was as relevant as it was when it came out, and I'm still not surprised today. Ultimately, I probably liked it more than I like Gurren Lagann, and I thought I wouldn't find anything that I liked as much as I like Gurren Lagann.
Same.
Yeah, some great stuff in there. And, if you've watched any of the more recent Trigger projects, you can see a lot of the sort of experimentation that may have started, with changing up their animation style, incorporation of CGI, even some of the cost-cutting stuff. I'm reminded of the particular episode where characters suddenly became cutouts, but it was actually hilarious.
Yes.
It was, so that stuff is all super cool. So I'm also a big Kill la Kill booster whenever it comes up. I'm gonna try to mash a few of the ones I have left on my list together, not because they're any less interesting, but because they tend to fall in the same vein of high turn off your brain, high action, not a whole lot of like depth shonen. So the first one I want to talk about is Drifters, which was originally a manga by Kota Hirano. And for those who may know that name, it's the same guy behind Hellsing, which is also a recommendation, even though I'm not going to go too deep into that. Anybody who was watching, Toonami or Adult Swim, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, knows that there was an absolutely excellent, well, there's two really good adaptations for Hellsing that are out there. The most recent one being Hellsing Ultimate, which is a much more faithful adaptation of the manga. The original Hellsing anime was produced before the original manga finished its run, so it kind of has its own arc, but it's also really cool. But Drifters is a science fiction and fantasy isekai, but don't let that isekai fool you, because but you forget about that very quickly. Essentially, it follows a bunch of historical warriors, leaders, figures pulled out of time into a fantasy world when they basically are fighting to the death. I know that there is a manga series that's running now that is very similar in overall concept, which my mind is blanking on at the moment. But this one is more about the war side and less about the 1v1 combat. It's over the top. The animation style is incredibly distinctive. It's bloody. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of horrible things happen. But it's also super cool. I'm not going to get too deep into like the plot, because who cares? You just want to see your faves from history take each other out. I mean, where else are you going to see a World War II era Japanese zero ace shooting dragons out of the sky while the Marquis de Sade leads an army of dwarves to storm a entire country that was originally set up by Adolf Hitler? It's just it's a crazy series. It doesn't need to make a lot of sense because it just goes with rule of cool. So that's a strong recommend, just for shonen. And I'm just gonna lump a couple of others in here as well. One which ran on American TV and one that didn't. The first one is Scried, which is sci-fi shonen craziness. Doesn't need a lot of description. Just go look it up. It's awesome. And then another one that may have slipped under the radar for people is a series called Needless. Aired back in, I think, the 2008, 2009. I could be off on that, but it's another one of these like insane post-apocalyptic shonen series. It when I first looked at it, I thought, am I looking at like Yu-Gi-Oh on crack? And in fact, I almost was. It is a ridiculous series where the main character basically gets everyone's power over the course of it, and it doesn't make him overpowered, which is, I don't even know where to go with that. But it's pretty cool.
I remember that one because Grand Rodeo did the opening for it. That's the main reason I remember that. And Grand Rodeo was doing a shit ton of openings for a while, so I was like, what is this show? Also, when you said Stride, or was it Stripe? I thought you meant Stride Alternative, and I was gonna be like, "Oh my god, he watched that show." I suffered through that bitch.
No, just Scried, the shonen extravaganza with the shell bullet Kazuma. Anyway, it's really cool. I don't think the English dub for it is particularly good. In fact, it makes it a lot worse. So if you watch it, go check it out in the original Japanese. They put a lot more heart into some of the stuff. Also, there's a man whose power is that he turns into a car. So, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
Okay. Okay, so for my next one, it's going to be Anohana, the flower we saw that day. And I'm not going to say the Japanese name because it's extremely long and I'm probably going to mispronounce something and look like an idiot. But this was the first anime that made me cry. This was the first anime where I literally had tears coming down my fucking face, crying in my dorm room. Because I was just like, bitch, no, this did not just happen. Are you kidding me? It is the story of childhood friends, and they're all teenagers now. one of their friends died when they were a child, when they were, oh, why do I keep trying to say that? When they were kids. And it affected all of them in completely different ways. And the main protagonist, or the main character, he basically became a NEET. He didn't leave the house. Basically, he still talked to people and like his family and stuff like that, but he completely just disconnected from the rest of the world due to his friend's death. The series occurs during the span of one summer, where he starts to see their dead childhood friend as a teenager. And so basically it's her ghost coming back. And what happens is he sees the ghost, and then slowly the rest of the friends start to see the ghost. And what happens is they basically all have to deal with their trauma, because they all manifested their trauma in different ways. And so basically it's like her ghost came back to kind of like save them from themselves. It is very heart-wrenching. It is very good also. It is a beautifully animated show. The music is gorgeous. But just like it's one of those shows where everything came together so well that it's kind of just like, I haven't rewatched it because I don't want to go through it again. Highly recommend it. And every person that was in that friend group is a completely different character archetype. And the way that they relate to each other is just also it's so real, because I could like see myself in those same situations with other people, and not just based off of trauma, just like, oh, well, I kind of have the relationship with that kind of person. Is it based off of this, or, what is it? Is it me doing this? Am I the initiator? Are you the initiator? And then it also deals with like social masks, where people are hiding their trauma through overcommitting or obsessions with other things. It's great. I love it. Highly recommend it. You need to watch it. I think it's an anime staple. It's not for everyone. I'm definitely going to say that, but I definitely think you just need to get through it and watch it. Like everything else that I'm fucking recommending, except Log Horizon.
Awesome. I think my next, or maybe my last recommendation is a series from, I guess the original adaptation was like 2002, 2003, Get Backers. It's one that maybe a lot of people overlooked, but when it ran, it was actually fairly popular enough to get a second season. Though if you watch it, the second season is really more of just a set of standalone events, and doesn't really tie as strongly into the original manga, which ran for about 6 or 7 years. It also the show ran concurrent to the manga, and then sort of ended before it. And so it's none of those cases of like a show that got a TV only ending. The plot of Get Backers follows two characters, Ban Mido and Ginji Amano. Both of them are sort of titular Get Backers. Their job is to go find stuff and return it. It seems like a fairly straightforward setup for some episodic shonen action, and in the beginning that's exactly what it is, but sort of at the midpoint of the first season, it very quickly branches into almost like utopian sci-fi, where you learn quite a bit about the world that you thought was being presented to you was in fact a computer simulation. And from that point on, it both gets weirder and more interesting. Sort of touching on different ideas about like what, the meaning of existence, and it was actually one of my earliest introductions in anime to characters who were ambiguous with their presentation, both like gender and in other ways. And in fact, even though it was not pitched or necessarily produced as like a boys love type feature, it wound up becoming very popular, at least the manga did, with fans of that genre, to the point where the original writer started to sort of bend some of the plots and characters in that direction, just to satisfy the interest of that fan base. So, and done in a pretty tasteful way. But at the end of the day, it's still a shonen. There's still plenty of sort of supernatural action. The abilities of the various characters are really cool. It's interesting that I wound up watching this before I'd ever heard of Hunter x Hunter, but there are so many cues now that I think about it that tell me that Yuya Oki, who was the original writer,
Yeah.
must have taken some direction from that series, and overall does not come off as like a cheap copy, because they're limited, but still it's cool to sort of dig into that area of that bit of time, basically the late 90s and early 2000s, that produced a lot of somewhat derivative but still fairly original action anime and manga. So I do recommend Get Backers. You can just watch the first season. It's pretty faithful to the manga. The second season it's okay. But if you only want to watch one thing, I would just say watch that, and you can clear it out pretty fast. I don't think the English dub is very good, so I would stick with the original voices.
Got it. So I definitely was gonna be like, I've heard of this, and I've heard of it in boys love circles.
You probably did.
So so I was just like, huh, okay. And then eventually you brought that up, and I was like, okay, now this makes sense, because I've looked at that before, and I've kind of just been like, what, boys love? This doesn't look like boys love. And then later on, after doing more research, I was just like, oh, so the Fujoshis kind of made it boys love.
Yes, basically.
Got it. They made it what they wanted it to be. And the author was like, yes, give me money. Whatever. I get it. Okay. Do I even have another one? Oh, B-Tomb.
Hey.
Yeah. I'm actually so surprised that we did not get another season of this. If you don't know what B-Tomb is, a quick plot synopsis, or like a quick summary of the show, is like there's this really popular online game, and basically the top players in the game actually get shipped to an island where the actual and the premise of the game is like you're fighting with like different types of bombs and grenades, and the humans actually get sent to an island and they have to play the game in person. Good shit. It's really good shit. It's some really good shit. You get your action, you get your little thingamabob, you get your titties. Yeah, you're gonna get your titties. You get your titties. You get your crazies. You get a lot of crazies. You get your betrayals, and it's a really enjoyable watch. Nano singing the opening songs also very helps, because she basically hypes you to fuck on up before you get into the bullshit. And they hinted at so many things that were going on behind the scenes in the last like few episodes, where I was like, oh, this is definitely getting a second season. And then nothing came. So, if you want something, you won't get much closure from it, but I think it finished serializing, right? It was a manga.
Oh yeah, I think it's over.
Yeah, it's over. So I highly recommend watching the anime, and then if you really need some closure, go pick up the manga and finish it. But I enjoyed it just like as is, what it was. It was really, really, really good. And that's all I got for that one.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole other discussion to be had about the death game genre.
Yes, Mirai Nikki.
Every time I wind up saying I'm not going to
Danganronpa.
read or watch another one, I'm right back in. So,
Oh, yes.
a lot of good
Also,
stuff.
everyone, do not watch Danganronpa, the anime. Season 1. You have to watch Season 3, because there are 2 parts to it, and it is canon, and it ends with the anime. Season 1, Danganronpa, is a travesty. Do not watch it. Play the damn game. It is so much better. You can get it for like $10 on Steam or PlayStation. Do not ruin... If the series literally ruins itself if you start with the anime.
That is funny.
It's
Maybe
fun-
my alternative suggestion is, if you don't want to watch the anime, you also don't want to play the game, I've seen multiple hilarious playthroughs of the game on YouTube. It actually works quite well in that format.
That's how So my experience with Danganronpa is, before it got localized, I watched a translated Let's Play on YouTube. And so around the time that the second game was coming out, they decided to localize it. And so I actually played the second game on my Vita. And the first game I watched it all on YouTube and fucking loved it. So yeah, you don't have to play the game. You can do a let's play on YouTube, and just be wary of the thumbnails, because if you get spoiled on something for Danganronpa, it kind of ruins a lot of it for you. So yeah, don't watch the Danganronpa Death Game anime unless it's season 3. Season 3, the way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to play 1. Supposed to play 2, and then the anime wraps it up with season 3. And there are 2 animes, and you're supposed to watch it back and forth. You're supposed to watch episode 1 of this one, episode 1 of that one, episode 2 of this one, episode 2 of that one, and then there's a 1-hour special Danganronpa 3 Hope, and that wraps all the shit up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're riffing, as on the subject of death games and how they overlap with anime and other adaptations, I wanted to make a soft recommendation for the film As the Gods Will, which is a theatrical adaptation of the manga of the same name. And normally I'm very iffy about these sorts of productions. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the live action stuff that comes out of the Japanese feature film market. Nothing against it. It's just often the ambition is a little further than the execution on a lot of these things. But this particular movie was actually directed by Takashi Miike. And again, if that name sounds familiar to you, then it's probably because you might remember his adaptation of Ichi the Killer, or the Yakuza movie Dead or Alive, not to be mistaken with the video game. Horrible, horrible video game adaptation of the game Dead or Alive, which I love as a series, but is absolutely unwatchable in any shape or form. But yeah, so that's a death game manga, and it's pretty good. It's not that long, so I think it runs less than an hour and a half. Or no, sorry, a little bit more than an hour and a half. If you don't like nesting dolls, this isn't going to do very much for you because, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I remember reading the manga a little bit and be like, oh, that's interesting. And then almost everybody dies in the very first game. And I'm just like, oh, it's one of those. But the film is actually pretty good. So I would recommend that one.
Okay. All right.